In today's world, we are increasingly dependent on technology. Our business and personal lives rely on it, but as you've probably noticed, it's unreliable. Our computers are slow, so we end up squinting at smartphones and tablets. The jokers we pay to fix our stuff have no clue what they're doing. We live in constant fear that something's going to happen to our personal data. So we're scared into paying for fake protection that proves useless when disaster strikes. Update attacks, fake Wi-Fi, cloud control, intelligent, successful people feel intimidated by the chaos and think it's somehow their fault. If they only knew what the industry was doing to them, they'd get torches and pitchforks. If only we had someone to explain it all in plain English so we can start protecting ourselves. Oh wait, we do! It's the Computer Exorcist Podcast with your host, Mark Anthony Arena.
From the Wallace Memorial microphone in my home office, overlooking the can of worms in downtown Rochester, New York, this is the Computer Exorcist Podcast. Mark Anthony Arena here, joined by Kenley Vogt, one of my favorite people. And thanks so much for being here.
Oh, you're welcome, Mark. Glad to be here.
So, I don't even know where to begin with him. He heard me on WYSL years back, and I cleaned up all his computers, and we go out to lunch every once in a while, and he imparts a lot of wisdom on me. And if any of y'all know me and you've listened to the show, you know I'm very angry about the devolution of my industry and the lack of ethics therein. But Kenley gave me the most incredible advice that I really should. It's like a priest when a priest gives you advice and you're like, yeah, that's spot on. I just need to remember to do this. I need to remember to behave myself in life. So what he did was he talked about how, number one, he reassured me that the industry always, humanity has always had a lack of ethics, right? Where, you remember the story you told me about the RCA televisions?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, right? Or the technician would go in and he'd sit there and say that the kinescope, that's what we called the picture tube, was dead, and to make sure that his diagnosis was correct, he had a little, what we called a kidney burner. It was a little device they put on the back, and it would absolutely blow out the tube.
Wow.
And so that way, like if they took it to a competitive shop or something, it wasn't like it was a wrong diagnosis.
So he would literally physically roast the tube just to say, hey, yeah, I told you so. That's nice. Yeah. So the checker actually did check, but then there was a burn button on there, and they pushed that, and it would fry the elements of the tube. Wow.
So it really was shot when we left. And most people generally got their picture tube replaced, so it didn't really matter. I mean, the checker part of the thing worked, but there was that ethics thing about making sure it was destroyed before we left, just to kind of leave a craw in my throat, right?
Right. And you saw that, just like me, where you see these oversights, these ethical oversights, and it just does not sit well, because you and I know it's possible to make money without screwing someone.
Right. Yeah, and you don't have to be right 100% of the time. I mean, I'm okay with falling on my sword and saying I was wrong, right? I mean, you take ownership of it, and you say, okay, I misdiagnosed it, but at least leave it the way you found it.
Right, don't break it. That's not right. That's the thing, that honesty and being willing to admit to making a mistake, or willing to admit that, hey, it's not the diagnosis or whatever, as opposed to these dudes, they walk in, they're arrogant, they're condescending, they do a virus scan, shrug their shoulders when they have no clue. If a dude is doing a virus scan, he has no clue what's actually happening. The other thing that one of my most unforgettable Kenley stories is how you said stores would do ads in the 70s for televisions, and they do like a doorbuster price on brand A. You'd go in there, and they would have brand A, and they would say, here you go, but then they would crank down the brightness and color on it, and then have a more expensive one.
And the focus, there was a focus adjustment on the back of the set. So the RCA lost leader television looked great. Well, looked icky compared to a General Electric, which was much cheaper and sold at full value. It was a form of bait and switch, really, right? But bait and switch is illegal, so they just made the picture look awful. And part of my job at RCA was to go visit the dealers and then look at the display TVs and make sure they were tuned up properly, which I would do. And then as soon as I left, they would set them right back to an icky picture. And, if you're a consumer, you walk in, you saw a name brand like RCA, a good television set, like back in those days, it would be like the XL100. They'd see that set and, it'd have a beautiful picture. But after it was adjusted, it would be all fuzzy and blurry. And then you'd see the GE, and it'd be really crisp. And the people would say, I want the GE one. And they didn't realize they're paying full retail price for that. It was totally marked up.
Right. So it's just
because the manufacturer suggested retail price on maybe the XL100 was maybe I'll just throw out a number. Let's say it was $300, right? And the GE was like retail price was $289.
So they do show up.
They see the lost leader at $279 for the RCA, but the picture was skank. Yeah,
but they would do that intentionally. That's the thing that gets me.
Oh yeah.
They would intentionally lower the quality of that in order to sell you a more expensive one. That blows my mind. But at least, so I felt better knowing, and like when I hear about chefs talk about people spitting in the food, that sort of thing, I'm actually reassured knowing it's not just my industry in this time of history. And finally...
Oh, yeah, I don't send food back to a restaurant, I'm going to tell you. I'll take it just the way it is, even if it's wrong, because you send it back, you don't know what you're going to get. And who's working and what mood they're in. I worked in the restaurants for a while before I went to college, and I'll honestly tell you, I used to be the night manager of alums way back in the day, and I could, and of course you work your way up, right? You start off as a dishwasher, and then you become a fry cook, and then eventually they let you work the grill, and then you become what they call the wheelman, the person controlling the orders and telling everybody what to do, and then they make you a manager. I thought I was God's gift to management, tell you the truth, because I was like 19 years old and being promoted. I didn't realize that was just a hairnet and name tag job, right? Where the I was surviving. The other people, it was like eventually just people rotate through, and I eventually rotated to be night manager. But I thought I was great, but I really wasn't. I just happened to be there longer.
Wow, that's something. Well, I think you're great. So,
well, I gave it my best shot. I'm not going to kid you. I really thought I was going to do the Horatio Alger story and become rich and move out west and all that. And my brother bought a steakhouse, and I went out there with him. And I think it was an old Ponderosa that had moved out. It was in Franklin, Indiana. We crashed and burned that business in about 4 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. R.I.P. Steakhouse.
Yeah.
So the one thing that really stuck with me, that priest advice that I was referring to, that really, really stuck with me, the thing that I really still need to emphasize or remember as I'm writing my next book, is how you explained how to be polite with something and how that actually goes farther. So, as y'all know, I disparage everything and everyone in my industry every day. But you had some of the best advice I've ever heard, and I'm writing about this in my training documents, actually. In my training documents where I teach technicians, I call it the Kenley method. And here's the deal. You told me that in the old days you would say, hey, you know what? GE is a fine product, but let me show you why mine is better, right? You were always, gracious or polite to the other one, because if you are knocking someone else, you are seen as not as good, right?
Absolutely.
So
I think that's key.
Yeah, yeah, as much as I want to rip on HP for being the worst organization ever created, or Samsung for being the least ethical organization in the universe, what I gotta say is, because people love it, people feel insulted because I walk into their house and they have an HP, and if I start criticizing that, then they feel insulted. Well, I just bought this thing and it works fine. What are you talking about, Mark? It does what I need it to do. They don't know that there's so many horrible things under the hood. So what I need to remember is, hey, look, that's a fine product. It does get you from point A to point B. However, let me show you a couple of things about it, that what it's doing to you, and let me show you there is a better way, and there is no need for all of the suffering.
Yeah, I mean, HP is a good example because they put all that bloatware onto your computer, right? Do you want to order printer cartridges? Do you need to order paper? All the ads and stuff that's running through that.
Yeah, nagging bloatware slows you down massively, records your behavior, and all that. So it's, okay, look, hey, that's cool. You're able to type up. It's basically a glorified typewriter because it'll crash and lose your documents. So that's you, and that's how I know you. I'm gonna do a little, read a little bit of your bio here, and in Art Bell fashion, I'll read your bio and then say, wow, that's a lot, and then we will talk about your upcoming book. Yeah. So. Kenley Vogt sent me a little bio, and I mean, I've known you, and I didn't know you did stuff this wild. So, apparently, during your senior thesis at SUNY Binghamton, you predicted a lot of things. You mentioned just like years ago when I predicted that streaming television was inevitable back in 2007. So, you predicted, you talk about, in your dissertation, your thesis, you talk about Arthur Samuel and machine learning in 1952. IBM researchers as early as 52 created a quote-unquote AI checkers program. It was a normal computer program, and that's the deal, folks. We're going to get into this, but basically in my next book, I talk about how AI doesn't have a soul. It's just a very, very advanced, very overblown computer program. So they made an AI checkers program, and the two copies of the software played against each other and learned from their experience. And the winner's strategy was kept and the loser's strategy was discarded. It's kind of like evolution. And so the machine eventually became smarter than its creator, at least with checkers. And in 1962, it beat a checkers master, proving that the machines could surpass the human expertise. And then Arthur Samuel coined that term machine learning. I know, when was there was a chess computer too, that was a couple decades later?
Yeah, IBM did. God, I can't remember what they used. I think it was like a Watson they used to beat a chess champion. The flip side of that story was, the thing that fascinated me about the checkers program is they ran on old IBM 701s. They were a pair. They were exactly the same. And one, at the very end of the experiment, started beating the other one about 16 times to 1. And they were running the same program. And they could never really explain that. Like, they were identical. The technicians went through and they verified that, they ran the same diagnostics. They were virtually, absolutely the same machines. Wow. Twins. Wow. But one was smarter than the other.
Right. So the hardware is the same, and I can explain that. That's no mystery to me.
And the software was the same too. Yeah.
The software evolved on one of them, right?
Yeah. It was learning.
It's like, I know a couple of sets of twins, and let's say one of them decides to take up a sport or a musical instrument or something, and they just practice more. Okay, that explains it. So it's the experience.
Yeah, it was the experience, and I just found that absolutely fascinating. Right? Yeah. I mean, that I thought, like, wow, look at this, and not for anything. The IBM engineers found it fascinating too, because they wrote about it, right? So it was amazing.
So your prediction back then was that you predicted that there were going to be Navy ships with self-healing networks, and it came true in the late 90s with the Arleigh Burke destroyers, and you were talking about that, and then later on you worked at a couple places like Columbia Banking, where you worked with AT&T StarLAN, which is really interesting. So I knew AT&T made their money through telephone calls, but you're saying they also did local area networks for large businesses, right?
Yeah, they did. But it was 1 megabit Ethernet. The
Which is
Ethernet standard
humongous.
just has come out,
Yeah,
right?
that's a humongous speed. Like, I'd be happy with a megabit now using my internet connection. And they were using that in '86, and the software was less ultra bloated back then. It wasn't bloated, so you were able to carry a lot of information.
The primary driver for those early LANs was to share a laser printer, because laser printers were about $6,000. And they didn't want to be placing lasers all over the place. So the idea was you do this print sharing thing.
Yeah,
and all the computers were, yeah. And then as a side note of that, then they were able to pick up, electronic mail, because once you get the computers connected, you can start to do that. But all that was server based. It all ran on the server, the mail package, and if they shared a database or anything else. But and basically, with the servers were just they were glorified software libraries, right? Basically, you go download your application, like if you're using like Microsoft Word, or there was a whole plethora of word packages in those days.
Just
before
one high-end computer.
Yeah, but it actually ran on the remote PCs, right? So we had distributed processing.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, so you were running packages on the local PCs, but you were storing the documents on the server, and the server probably was the print server as well.
Yeah, and you could kind of start to see the evolution that the mainframe was going to die, right? Because the mainframe was basically going to be just a big server or some kind of database engine. And then at the end, all the real processing, the report generation, all that stuff was being offloaded onto the remote PCs.
Oh, interesting. Okay, because originally the mainframe was a humongous thing. I mean, by necessity, it filled up a whole room. My dad used to hook up the air conditioners in the floors of those rooms to cool these behemoths. But then you're saying, number one, the mainframes, just through miniaturization, they were able to shrink all that power into a normal server tower, but also they weren't dumb terminals anymore. They weren't just screens. They were independent computers.
Yeah, and they were depending on the independent computers to do some of the processing, right?
Yeah, that's
and that's how we got to where we are today.
Yeah,
and that's one of my future predictions for AI. Right at the end, distilled engines will be remote. They'll be working on your phone or your PC.
And I really hope so, because at the moment, I hope this is just a temporary moment in history where we are dependent on a central AI that records us and uses it against us and so on. I really hope, and I have a buddy, if you look to one of my past episodes, I have this buddy named Jamari who was on here a few months back, and he did that. He actually downloaded, I think it was Meta's Llama model, and he plopped it on his own computer so that he could tinker with AI without Meta recording him. So that's pretty cool.
I think we're going to see more of that as things go on, especially with the AI data centers, right? Because they are so power hungry, and they need so much cooling that and all that expense ends up. They got to pay for that somehow, right? I was an early adopter of AI. I bought lifetime licenses to some of the basic engines that came out. I think I own about 6 of them. Yeah, and the deal there is, right, is like, how are they ever going to get their money back? Because I think I paid like $99 or something for those licenses, for lifetime use. Now, they do restrict the number of queries I can do in a day, but with so many engines, I go one to the other or whatever. And I came up with something totally new now. I got to tell you, what I'm doing now with the engines is I use one to do a prompt. I say, I need a prompt that'll do this, and I tell it what I want. It might be I have a friend who's a physicist. He wants to run through math problems. So in GPT, I'll put in, I need a prompt for this, and then I'll go take that over to Anthropic, and I'll run it through there, because there's a lot better at math. So I run it through that, and then we get an answer, and I send it back to him and say, here's the results, and I'll tell it in the prompt, show the steps, so it'll show me everything.
Show this, and that's how show your work. That's so important, especially because with this AI stuff, you want to make sure it's not hallucinating. You want to make sure it's using real, valid sources, and even so, right? And again, folks, my mission in life is going to be to warn people about the hazards of AI. Just look, if you want to use it, fine, but please know the shortcomings.
Yeah, we love, as Americans, right? We love latest and greatest technology. And generally, as a technologist, right, and a futurist, I put on rosy-colored glasses. I filter everything to the good. I say, oh, this is going to be great. As a
person, you're an optimist, too, and that's what I admire about you.
Yeah. But and the other thing I was going to say, I'll give you this as a free tip, right? But when you're writing your prompt, if you start your prompt off with a thing, stop and think about this. It forces the engine to go deeper and look deeper in. Yeah, it looks deeper into its.
This. You tell the AI to do that.
Yeah, that's how I start my if it's going to be like a deep learning research prompt, absolutely.
We need to tell computer programmers that. Stop for 5 seconds and think about this before you unleash it on humanity.
Yeah, I picked that up from IBM, actually. They used to, I got one here. They used to hand out these think placards.
Oh, wait, did you?
And we had those on our desks to have us just take time out and think. We're the smartest people in the room, right? I mean, the computer's kind of a dumb imp in a weird way, right? It's got a huge database and it's got a knowledge base to pull from, but it's really us quizzing it and asking it to do something.
I'm going to quote you on that in my next book, because I did read articles about that where IBM, because IBM, all their computers were called ThinkStation and ThinkPad and ThinkBook and all that. And it came from the fact that there was one was it Watson, one of the executives?
Yeah, it was the founder, Thomas Watson, said that everybody had to have those, and they had it pretty well ingrained. I've got. This is one of the very original ones.
So what?
It's in marble.
Really?
Yeah.
I like
that
one
because Oh yeah, the other one was the modern one. That's the one I had on my desk. But
it looks
they came in different colors. The weirdest thing out of those whole signs was there was a time right when we were trying to break down the Cold War. We toured Khrushchev through the United States. And he got to see different manufacturing plants and stuff. Yeah, they showed him stuff. Well, when him and his gang showed up at the IBM facility down in Endicott, they saw the Think sign. Think in Russian means the defect.
Oh, no.
they got the biggest charge out of those signs all over.
Really? Well, that's interesting because, and that's... Oh, that opens up a can of worms in my head. Like, a lot of light bulbs are going off. Because for them, it's like, think twice, don't give in to the Soviets, think twice, and think for yourself, right? So it actually goes with the whole thing. I speak a little Russian, but I didn't know that verb. But dumat, right? Dumat is to think. But I didn't know it was also used for defect. So that's amazing, because it's like, think for yourself. And wow, I gotta tell people that, like, think for yourself, defect from this whole computer craze bandwagon thing. Wow. But the fact that sign existed in your desk in those days, that Watson wanted that on everyone's desk, of stop and think, don't do something stupid, don't do something knee-jerk. Like, the whole industry needs that right now, because everything that's going on in the industry is knee-jerk stuff that they should have stopped and thought about first.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Wow. So I'm gonna do a little more of your intro here, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll come back and discuss your book. So, wow, I love that think sign. I need one for myself, just in my personal life. Like, Mark, stop and think before you buy this house or date this person or whatever.
Exactly, yeah.
So then you ended up working at Kodak with digital products, with digital equipment such as Telstar. And I love that you said I worked with a team of fine engineers. You're always there to compliment. Who deployed a fiber distributed data interface. And again, it was 1 megabit, which is incredible speeds back then. It was as a backbone to Kodak Park. And you probably ran into my uncle there and plenty of other people. We started to design the fiber back home with Cisco routers back in '84. And back when Cisco was good and their products worked, apparently. And the design was to connect the incompatible networks across Stanford campus. And Kodak was going to do the same. Mm-hmm. Oh, so they had 150 different protocols running in that same fiber backbone. Wow. So you saw what Stanford did, and you were going to do it at Kodak.
Yeah, I didn't see it, but the executives at Kodak saw it, and they brought Cisco in. We were one of the first adopters of the Cisco routers when they were just coming out. And Cisco was developed to connect up to Stanford networks. I mean, that's and they were all Stanford grads and that.
Oh, because Cisco is short for San Francisco. So I thought it was started because of Stanford's need.
Yeah, and I used to joke, like John Chambers, their CEO at the time, he'd buy a company and he'd say, fellas, you can do anything you want with this product, but it's got to run on iOS. and I think that's really true. I mean, I just kind of envisioned that. And actually, that was like Thomas Watson, right? When the guys had designed the very first mainframes for Sperry Univac. Sperry looked at them. I think they built 8 machines, and they said, well, we filled the market. There's no more need for it. And they let the guys go. They went down to the IBM sales office in New York City, and they sat down in the lobby to talk to Tom Sr. And eventually buzzed them up, and he said, they were explaining about mass storage computing and all that. And I just kind of went over his head. He says, look, fellas, he says, you guys can design anything you want, but it's got to run on cards. Because he sold cards for that algorithm system, right?
Well, it's just like Kodak wanting everything to remain on film in this century.
Yeah.
And it's just like Henry Ford saying you can have your car in any color you want as long as it's black, right? And then someone's got to come along.
Yeah, and they did. I mean, they were happy for the work, even though they knew that they didn't really need card decks to drive it. They could drive it from terminals. But hey, you know what? You got a patronage like that, you just go with it, right?
Wow. So he said, look, as long as you use my old technology and don't use anything new, you can do whatever you want. That's nuts. You have all these vignettes. That's the word. You have all these vignettes from the industry. So,
well, I like studying history in it, and of course I love computers, right? So at the end of the day, they kind of fit together. I like business history. How did they get here from there? I think that's really the answer or the question, right? And that's what I'm always trying to answer in my head. Because if you don't understand the evolution of how things happen, you can't see how it's working today.
Oh, great point. Because how many people are walking into these jobs these days? They've never used a 486. They've never used floppy disks. They don't. At least I want people to have the basic concept. None of these technicians understand how to use any. They don't know what a hard drive is. 99% of the time, when someone says, "My prior computer guy said I don't have enough gigs," and I look at it. All right, last week a lady said, "My computer guy said my laptop is shot and it doesn't have enough gigs," whatever that means. Right, gig is a unit of measurement. It doesn't say what it measured. So I get there. The machine was a 1-year-old HP laptop with 8 gigs of RAM, which is still standard for this year, right? It's still recommended for this year, and it had a humongous hard drive, but it was an old style hard drive. So that joker didn't understand that HP to this day is putting old style hard drives in their computers to deliberately make them slow. So the machine was horribly slow, but he didn't understand that it was a recent machine. He didn't understand that you could upgrade the hard drive to a new style thing. He told her he shrugged his shoulders and said, put it in the garbage and buy another one. Right? So the people we trust are out there doing this. Anyway, so you got to understand the basic concepts.
And that's probably out of ignorance more than deception, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
in that case,
kind of,
he was just,
Yeah.
So I have to remember they know not what they do. And if I'm polite, maybe some of them will listen to me. So to finish up your vast resume here. Actually, it doesn't even touch the stuff you've done at local internet providers. But so in the 90s, you were at IBM working on the Kodak account, doing the fiber networks and Sonnet, SONET, which is Synchronous Optical Network. That's cool. That's a cool acronym. Another self-healing network technology. I wish routers today were self-healing. I mean, some of them will reboot themselves weekly.
Yeah, the way how the Sonnet works is it actually sends duplicate packets, and then if a node goes down, there's a duplicate packet floating out there.
That's wild.
And so it was built to support the telephone network, right? So it had telephone increments for bandwidths, and like a T1, being a 1.54 megabits, and it just kind of scaled, to an OC3, which is like about 150 or so megabits.
Wow! So
and of course,
at this point, you're up to a 1.5 megabit from the old 1 megabit that you were using. But also, I remember using OC3s at RIT in 2000. I remember them bragging they had dual OC3s. So they had two connections that were 150 megabit apiece. Nowadays, a household can have 150 meg.
Right, without a doubt. But at the time, that was revolutionary, right? Like I worked on one of the largest websites in the country at the time. Kodak had it over at the Hawkeye plant. It was to run their picture vision, which they sold off. But the idea was people would store their pictures up in the cloud, and there was two DS3s going to the internet to support that.
Yeah.
And so that's a third of an OC3.
Wow.
And we had at one time I actually got to put one into. I designed one. I didn't get to put it in. I wish I did. To Steven Spielberg's house.
Wow.
They had a product over in Elm Grove. It was called Fido. It's film in, digital out. Cool. And they were using it for and there were two Fido machines. There was one for Disney and there was one for Spielberg. And the way how they did it was they separated them. Different engineers had to work on them because they didn't want us collaborating and maybe sharing information about what projects were running through those machines.
Wow.
So I had Fido 1 and somebody else had Fido 2, and it was just kind of worked on need to know because whatever their projects were. But mine was going down to Spielberg's house, which is kind of wild, right? He was taking it into his basement, working on it with those Silicon Graphics machines.
Wow, I remember the late 90s SGI machines.
Yeah.
Wow, those were really cool. Like there was Sun and there was Silicon, and they were both really rare, cool machines. And they were both purpley in color. Yeah, wow. Yeah. And then the wild one is I got to put one into the Russian embassy. So they could do... after the Cold War ended, right, the Russian satellites are flying overhead, so they decided for customers like Google Earth, not necessarily Google, but other companies like that were doing mapping. Terra server.
Yeah, there were other people doing mapping software, right? So they would get the flybys from the Russians, and they would go to an analyst, and then they would keep you from focusing down on some sensitive area, like let's say Area 51. And if you go on Google Earth and you look at it today, you'll get to a point and all of a sudden it blurs out.
Yeah, so someone can sit there and censor it?
Yeah, they got censored. And so I got to work on that project, and that was really kind of interesting, But if I told you, like, back when I started, I'd be dropping circuits into the Russian embassy, I'd say never. Well, it's not going to happen.
You did that. You went to a Russian embassy and did that back then.
I didn't go in there. I just did the design work. I mapped the whole thing out and got it all together, got the orders out, and then watched it get installed at least in the Rochester end.
That's incredible.
So, that was just wild. I'll just say I think that's the wildest gig ever.
Yeah, I'll say, wow. We're going to take a break here. We're going to come back and do a part 2 and talk about your book. Yeah, Kenley Vogt, thank you so much for being here. TheComputerExorcist.com to find out more. And that's what I was going to say is those dual OC3 networks back then, even though they're now laughable compared to what we have in a home connection, things were faster. I remember sitting in a buddy's dorm room at RIT and seeing how his web pages, he had a dual core G4 Mac Tower Quicksilver, and the web pages he would load would be instantaneous because web pages were well written back then. Nowadays, everything is much slower, because websites are more and more bloaty, and they have 90 layers of databases that they have to check underneath the hood. So you're sitting there with that stupid spinning circle blaming yourself, when in reality the website was made by a slob and it has 90 layers of databases. And
it's relying on your end device.
Well, it's making you think. Well, sure, it's rendering a page and plopping it on your device, right?
Right.
But it's making you think it's your fault, when in reality it's like if you call an office and you say, "Hey, can I talk to Kenley?" and someone says, "Hold on, let me get him." And then you're sitting there waiting and waiting and waiting, blaming yourself.
Right.
But it's their fault.
Yeah, they got all kinds of traffic and stuff on it, whatever. But yeah, it was fast transport, I'll just say.
Yeah, so basically what I'm saying is they used those dual OC3s, they were a lot more efficient, and the websites were a lot less bloated. So everything was faster back in those days, which is crazy, when an entire campus could run on 2 connections that we use in a household today. All right, thecomputerexorcist.com. We'll be back next week.